One of the rewards of serving this organization in an official capacity is having the privilege of introducing various people as keynote speakers at our meetings. This is especially true today. I could think of a few other professionals whose careers and commitment so well reflects what natural resource social scientists do on a daily basis. I met Stan long ago when I was a young rural sociologist working at the University of New Hampshire. His work informed my studies, and as luck would have it, one of his early MS students became a lifelong friend while I was completing my doctorate. Mike Nolan and I spent much time together at the various venues of the Rural Social Society meetings. Stan, after hearing about some of our exploits, soon joined our sojourns. Indeed, my first trip to Europe was with Stan and Mike. We met in New York, and we flew to Rome, where we spent several days being typical American tourists before traveling on to Bologna for an international meeting. While there, we were able to visit several of Italy's famous northeastern cities, museums, and piazzas. After the meetings, we went on to Switzerland and spent a few days in Nuremberg. There, Stan, in his Sunday best, shoes and sports jacket, and Mike in tennis shoes and a light summer jacket, traversed down the still-torn mountain through glaciers and snowpack to our small motel in town. I decided to take the lift down and travel up through the fields on cow-worn trails to meet them. Thinking back on this, I realized it was one of my best decisions, then and now. Over the years, Stan and Mike and I worked on a variety of projects and papers. I was always amazed by his tenacity and ability to move our efforts forward. Always with grace, always with kindness. A review of his vita provides ample testimony to this. Stan L. Albrecht is president of Utah State University. He was appointed to this position in February 2005. Previously, he served this university in a range of capacities, including 4 years as executive vice president and provost. He was also the dean of the College of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences. He has also served as a department chair, academic dean, associate director of a major research institute, and an academic vice president. To complement these academic positions, Stan also has held a range of professional assignments, including serving on a Congressional Office of Technology Assessment Panel on alternatives to basing the MX missile, and as a member of the Department of Interior's Mineral Management Service Science Advisory Committee. Dr. Albrecht has authored or co-authored 5 books and published over 100 refereed articles and book chapters. His extensive research efforts have been supported by a host of agencies, including USDA, EPA, and NIEHS. Not surprisingly, this research has earned him outstanding research awards from both the University of Florida and Brigham Young University. Moreover, he has received several teaching awards reflecting his interest in and concern for advancing the education of our future leaders. And he has ably served his professional organizations in a variety of elected and appointed positions, including serving as editor of Rural Sociology. As president, Stan has been asked to serve in a diverse and large number of organizational committees, including the American Council on Education's Commission for Women in Higher Education, the Association of Public Land-Grant Universities, formerly the SOLJA, chair-elected of the Commission on International Programs, Cache Valley Regional Council, Economic Development Corporation of Utah Board of Trustees, member of the NCAA Division I Board of Directors, Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities, as Commissioner, Salt Lake Chamber Board of Governors, Wells Fargo Northern Utah Community Board, as Chair of the Western Athletic Conference Board of Directors at the Utah Campus Compact. In short, he's very active. In his spare time, when there is some, which I understand has become quite rare over the past several years, Stan enjoys relaxing with his charming wife, Joyce, their children and grandchildren. Dr. Albrecht's talk is entitled Environment, Society, and the 21st Century University. I know I have been enriched by his friendship, and I'm extremely pleased to be able to introduce my good friend and colleague, President Stan Albrecht, to you today.
Thank you, Al, for that kind and generous introduction, and thanks to all of you for allowing me to have the opportunity to meet with you for a few minutes here this morning. I must tell you I felt a little bit overdressed, but I did leave my jacket down there, and that makes it just a little bit better. Your conference theme on integrating conservation and sustainable living is timely and critically important. I think all of you know, and I think that you've had conversations about this over the last several days, this is the most auspicious time to bring together academic and government researchers, agency scientists, NGOs, and others to talk about the theme that you've chosen. And so I do appreciate the opportunity to share a few of my thoughts as part of this discussion. I also must tell you that I greatly appreciate the opportunity to share some time with old friends and valued colleagues. I miss those opportunities. We don't have them nearly often enough, at least on my end these days. And I particularly enjoyed spending part of an afternoon and evening with Dawn Field, and add my expression of respect to Dawn for the wonderful leadership that she's provided in this area of study over the years. I value greatly the friendship that I have had with him. I have to tell you that there aren't nearly as many laughs in my current assignment as we shared as we were traveling across Italy and Spain. But the role is an interesting one. I have an old friend who described the university presidency as being akin to entering a javelin competition and choosing to receive. And there are lots of days that it feels like that. My state requires that presidents undergo periodic reviews and evaluations. My last was completed just 2 weeks ago. That review includes bringing in outside folks to do interviews with a broad range of constituents to assess how the president is doing. And as I looked at the review, one of the members of my faculty responded as follows: "If he is still president a year from now, I will either leave the state or kill myself." We put him down as undecided. Now, I recognize that I'm taking a fairly major risk today by selecting as a topic an issue where there is certainly a great deal more expertise in this room than I bring to the topic. But it is, I think, an important topic and one that demands all of our attention. And particularly, I think, the attention of those of you in this room who study the interface between society and environment. I was told last night as we were at dinner by Matt Carroll that the last time he heard me speak was a keynote address at the Rural Social Meetings a few years ago, and he said the talk was very sober, but true. This talk is probably also going to be very sober, but I hope equally is true. A month ago, I was in Gainesville, Florida. One morning, I picked up the local newspaper, and on the front page, there were two contrasting stories featured. The first, under the heading, "Flooding Spares Memphis Landmarks," showed pictures of floodwaters in the Mississippi River inundating large areas of Memphis as the Mississippi basically wrapped its arm around that city, as well as other communities in Illinois, Kentucky, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Large sections of farmlands in these states were underwater, with the record runoff, and an intentionally breached dike in Louisiana was allowing hundreds of square miles of Cajun country to be inundated with water in order to save the city of New Orleans. Immediately below this article was another titled, "Drought Descends on Texas and Neighboring States." This article noted that in a spring marked by historic floods, Texas and other parts of the country were suffering through a drought nearly as punishing as some of the driest deserts anywhere in the world. Some parts of Texas have not seen precipitation for 10 months. Cattle ponds and farm fields are drying up, and residents are living under the constant threat of wildfire. And as I got on the plane yesterday morning to fly here, there was a series of articles that talked about the Missouri River flooding, now following the Mississippi, and then talking about the spread of some of those wildfires into Arizona, which is now experiencing what is perhaps the largest wildfire in the history of the state. The same issue of the Gainesville Sun included references to a tornado season that has been unprecedented. This storm pattern has continued at an even more devastating pace since that publication. The May 22nd tornado that tore a 6-mile path across southwestern Missouri is now being described as the most deadly in American history. That storm killed scores of people as it slammed into the city of Joplin, destroying a hospital, school, churches, businesses, and homes, and crushing cars like soda cans while leaving a forest of splintered tree trunks where entire neighborhoods once stood. The Joplin tornado was one of 68 reported across several Midwestern states over that same weekend, stretching from Oklahoma to Wisconsin. And the destruction wrought on May 22nd has now been followed by more days of extraordinary tornado activity in the same area of the country, and as you know from this last week, actually spreading as far east as Massachusetts. All of this now coming on the heels of scores of destructive storms that killed more than 300 people across the southern United States just a month earlier. These kinds of dramatic weather-related events are occurring in many other parts of the globe as well. Earlier this year, Australia experienced weeks of destructive, record-setting flooding. A combination of floods and droughts has affected wheat and other harvest yields in many areas of the world, resulting in near-record prices for basic staples that feed much of the world's population. The Wilkins Ice Shelf in the western Antarctic Peninsula, a huge bank of ice that has been stable for most of the last century, has now begun to crumble. Members of my own faculty who are working in the Arctic region of North America bring back tales and stories of dramatic loss of the polar ice cap, with destructive impacts on a variety of animal species and the threat of destruction to ecosystems in ways that we've only begun to assess and understand. And unfortunately, this list could go on and on. The dramatic events that I've referenced are generally attributed to the power and force of Mother Nature, though as I will note in just a moment, it is the human fingerprint on them that will serve as the basis of much of what I want to say today. There are similarly dramatic events that are much more in the news these days that are also more directly to human activity. I would like to cite two examples just for illustrative purposes. First of all, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill catastrophe in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010 will certainly be recognized as one of the most environmentally damaging in recent memory. While much has been written about the Gulf and coastal ecosystem impacts of the spill, the longer-term consequences for fish, bird, and animal species, as well as for flora and fauna in a large area of this country's Gulf Coast, is yet to be determined. Second, the radioactive contamination that's coming from damaged nuclear plants in Japan following the March 2011 earthquake and tsunami will only be understood over years and even decades. While the damage to the nuclear plants was caused by natural disasters of incredible magnitude, the longer-term consequences are clearly related to human activity. And then finally, there are those many issues that those of you in the audience today study on a regular basis as you document the relationship between society and the natural resource base upon which we depend. Population growth, for example, as well as problems that come from the depletion of all of our natural stocks: water, hydrocarbons, forests, rivers, fish, and arable lands, while not generating renewable flows. Thomas Friedman has recently noted that most of us are propping up our current lifestyles and our economic growth by drawing, and increasingly over-drawing, on the ecological capital of other parts of the world. As these other parts of the world catch up with us in their patterns of consumption, the problem is multiplied several-fold. Let me cite just two of Friedman's examples. First of all, Chinese developers are laying more than 52,700 miles of new highways throughout the country. Some 14,000 new cars hit China's roads every day. By 2020, China is expected to have 130 million cars, all demanding new imports of oil, all adding to the flow of carbon into the atmosphere. It is projected that fully half of the buildings to be constructed in the world between 2000 and 2030 will be constructed in China, and unfortunately, Chinese buildings are 2.5 times less energy efficient than their counterparts in Germany. Now, just to give you an idea of what has happened, this is a picture of the city of Shanghai in 1990. Next is a picture of Shanghai in 2020. As you see, exactly the same location, looking at the river flowing through. And the change, the contrast is dramatic. India's growth is occurring at almost an equally rapid pace. To put India's growth into perspective,